And we are officially live from California to Arizona y todo eso y más. You got Rosanna Alvarez here in conversation, poetic flow with Lydia Zulema Martinez Vega, because our name should be taking up space like that. We were having a little bit of fun talking about what we do in our authenticity during staff meetings and such. And so that's the little 2 minute delay there was me and my chisme mitote, like, tell me more, I want to hear. And talking about our pocha first language as Spanish and still having the pocha, little hiccups here and there. So thank you for that pre-platica. And now we're here and it's 3 o'clock, both of our time zones, because apparently there is no difference. Thank you for that trigonometry lesson.
God.
I can't keep track. I always got to Google things. So here we are. And these are informal little hangouts with homies who flow poetically. And you've been sharing your wares, your poetry, your activism. You're one of those co-conspirator folks that's always like, how can I get your stuff? How can I support your stuff? And I'm like, I need to support your stuff. And so we'll be putting in links to your stuff también on the replay. But I will shut up and take a sip of water here. You can imagine it's tea, and I'll let you spill some tea as we both sip here.
Buenas tardes. I have a feeling this is going to go sideways and a hot mess. No, buenas tardes. Thank you so much for having me on here. You asked, and I was like, oh my gosh, I made it. Yay. So no, thank you so much. I'm humbled. I'm honored. You're one of those individuals that, for me, right, on my scheme, from my side, that I look to as, as we talk about, all of this like hella chingonaness and stuff. And so you're one of those individuals that I'm like, dude, she's badass. She does this and she does that. And she has her own PowerPoint like graphics that I'm still trying to like buy so I could use and make my PowerPoints look cool. So when you invited me, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm excited.
I'm excited. I've told folks several times over, in a lot of ways, this is me just taking time, right, for myself. And sometimes we need that accountability, right? When we make it, suddenly I'm accountable to people who I made commitments to, like, hey, come talk to me at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, that I have to take a time. Otherwise, we work through and we power through. And somebody said, when you do what you love, you never work a day in your life. And I'm like, true, but you also never work as hard as you imagined you ever could in your life, because it matters so much. And so I'm grateful that all you poetic folk are taking time to just humor me in these little requests and sharing that with other people, whether it's live or on the replay. And you've been writing for a hot minute, right? When I was pulling up I was like, do I put her fancy full ass bio up in the mix? I'm like, no, I'm going to save it for later. And I was like, mírala, perdón, right? And I love that part of just reflecting on who are these folks that we cross paths with in life. And it doesn't matter where we are. It's like, there's this connection that we can still feel in a different state across the nation, globally, lo que sea. So tell me about your process. How do these poems come to you? Do they catch you? Do you catch them?
Oh man. I've been writing forever. I know I've been writing forever. I didn't know I was a writer until I showed up on a college campus and was told I was a writer. Because before that, I just wrote. I knew that I could like ditch and miss school for a very long time, show up, negotiate, take some tests, and then pass them and then disappear again. But nobody ever took the time, right, to say like, wow, like this is like good stuff, right? I grew up in the Centro Valle, San Joaquin Valley, very clear demarcations of where people belonged and didn't belong. You had an awareness of where the KKK towns were. And so, people talk about sundown towns and I'm like, yeah, they're alive and well in Cali. So therefore there really wasn't any, any like, oh my gosh, you're a writer or whatnot. I just knew I wrote and it felt good. And it was a place to place all my thoughts that I wasn't sharing with nobody in journals on paper. And I just held it very close to me and very privately until I showed up to college. And all of a sudden I'm being told that I don't need to take, I was being placed in advanced classes because apparently I had passed these tests and I didn't need to be in these other classes. I could be in higher classes. And I'm like, I have no clue what that means. And yeah, and me doing poetry and actually starting to read them out loud happened as a result of blackmail.
Mm.
I got blackmailed to do that one. So when I got to college and, with the invention of computers and printers, I began to type up my work. Just for my own nerdy purpose, I would put them in protector sheets in a binder. And that was me, right? Still nobody had a clue this is what I was doing. And then one day I left my binder unattended at Chicano student programs over at UC Riverside. And one of the individuals there, Jackie, she got a hold of it. So she started going through it. And next thing you know, she's like, you need to read this. This is your gift. That's your responsibility. You have to share. And I'm like, no. And there was, I think, a Muertos event, a Dia de los Muertos event. There was an event. And so she was like, you're on the lineup and you're reading. And that's how you're going to get your poems back. And I'm like, but I need my poems if I'm going to read. She's like, well, then write new ones. And I was like, oh. I was like, but, and she did. She held herself, and I had to write new poems and perform them. And then I got my binder back. But after that, man, that bug bit, and that was it. That was it. But yeah, I was blackmailed.
You were blackmailed. That's not, it's a fun story. And at the same time, it's a relatable one, right? Like you are not the only person that movida has pushed off into the abyss in that way, in that writing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's wild.
Yeah, and then after that, I would do, so I was like I was a poet in residence for Chicano student programs. After that, I would be the poet, and read poetry for our, for the events done by CSP. And then one year, we had brought out, or CSP had brought out Maestro Montoya, right? Mm-hmm. And so then, so Maestro, so then I was on the bill, right? I was going to open for him, right? And so I was like, oh my gosh, I get to open for Maestro Montoya. And so, so we're sitting in the office and, I gave him my binder to take a look and, go through it and stuff. And so, Maestro Montoya, being the beautiful person that he is, right? That he was, que en paz descanse and stuff, just gave me just just really beautiful words and feedback and encouragement. And between those two individuals, I mean, that was it. So then after that, it was just kept writing and, started the whole publication stuff. And yeah, and the process, I don't know. I think for me, it's always been a way to desahogarme. Mm-hmm. It's always been to desahogarme, and it's always been to take things out of me and place it on something that isn't me, right? And so in the beginning, they were very angry, very angry. But somebody always said they're very angry, but you always close them with this like sense of hope,
right?
And then over the years, right, they've morphed and they've transformed. And even when I was like trying to figure out, who wanted to show up, I was laughing because I'm like, there's love poems. I'm like, that's, because there's some people that the only thing they've ever heard, depending on where I was at, was potentially maybe just the angry poems. And there might be people later on meeting me now that are listening to these more like loving different types. And if they were to ever hear those ones, they would be like, whoa. I'm like, yeah, that's there.
Yeah, right. I've seen that, like even in my little electronic folder nerdiness, organizing my own poems and into collections. I'm like, this one can't coexist with that one over there. And I'm like, why not? They're in conversation with each other across space and time. Like they grow with us, they morph with us. And I can wake up one day and be salty as all hell. And midday, muy enamorada, right? It's the same person, but muy enamorada, right? So like it's human. It's a human response, but folks love putting us in boxes. And here we are on virtual boxes talking about boxes.
Right. Interesting. I could say polite and please and still be the angry Chicana. It's actually worse.
Yeah, it is. Because people don't know what to do with that, right? They expect to get angry and go off and pop off. And when you don't, there's a confusion for sure. I think we've both witnessed these in our mama roles, right? In our mama.
Because it's easy to respond, right? He's, to them, they already know they already have their recipe. Like, oh, she's angry or whatever. She's losing her shit. So I already know how to respond to shut it down. When you're just like composed, they're like, wait, hold up. I don't know what to do. And it's like, yeah, you should worry because we're going to be very like, shoo, shoo, shoo. And so, and exactly right. They don't know what to do because they've stereotyped you and pigeonholed you that it's like, it's what is it? It's that removing of your humanness, that you're capable of being able to be angry and hold it together versus just all like, ¿verdad?
Yeah. And I love that you describe your poems as a desahogo. Because that's exactly what they feel like to be like, we don't need validation to do how we do. It's just nice when you find those points of connection in this bigger constellation of who we are when we write. And that the writing sometimes is beyond us. And in your case, I'm like, you've got the Chicano blessings, the vámonos, right? Hit the ground running. And I won't tell you when to share your poems, but whenever you want to bust one of those out, I know that a lot of folks are leaning on poets right now. Because of that same thing. We can articulate injustice and weave in hope, right? Whether it's at the end or the beginning, but there's that sincerity of voice that for sure is something that resonates with all people. So I've read some of your poems, and you've shared them graciously and generously from time to time over the years. And you're right, they hit a kind of way. There's that thorniness and that softness. So I don't know what you're going to share today. So I'm like, is it going to be a love poem? Is it going to be an angry poem? Is it going to be a braided poem? ¿Cómo vamos? ¿Cómo vamos?
I have no clue either. And then I was like, because you know how we have, we've talked over the years, right? That sometimes we like, oh yeah, I want to read that one. And sometimes they're like, raise your hand.
The poem's gonna pick you right in.
I'm going to do this one. So only because, what a great way to just practice it, right? So I wrote this last week on the 12th. I wrote this last week on the 12th, right? As many were waking up to finding out about another one, right? Duante, making sure I don't mispronounce. Duante, right? And so obviously, right, I'm in the middle of all this stuff, meetings or what have you. And then, I happen to check media and then that's there, but I'm having to like, keep my shit together because I gotta, be professional. And it was just like, I was choking, right? I just couldn't. So then I just, threw something down and then I typed it up this morning and I was like, well, maybe it'll show up, maybe it won't. And I'm like, you know what? So this is the first time I've even read it or even heard it. So who knows what's going to happen and stuff. So at the moment it is untitled. My response to Duante Wright's murder by the police state. As our sons complete their 11th rotation, set to begin their 12th, my internal clock begins. Tick tock, tick tock, tick tock. How much longer do I have with him? What will be the cause of death? How will he instill fear into grown-ass men? Will it be the medieval times wooden sword his brother gifted him when he left for Arizona? Perhaps it'll be the mini wooden crossbow, the arrows of which we have no clue where they are. Some wash, some park, some ravine perhaps, lost for sure. Maybe it'll be because he'll talk back and insult them, calling them colonizers and or slave patrols. What admonishment will my child receive in death as to how he could have prevented his own outcome. Yes, sir. They'll point to me for allowing him to express himself in cursive words when his emotions were too big for this hodgepodge of a bastardized language called American English. For sure, that was a sign he'd end up down the wrong path. As his 11th cycle nears closure and his uppity independence grows, moving him to take out the garbage, sword in hand in case there's a possum or a cat to fend off, or as he zigzags through the street on the scooter, leaving sidewalks for the neighbors walking their dogs on his way to gather the mail. My heart pounds. I've timed the time it takes to make the round trip to the mailbox and back. I open all doors and windows to air out the house and so that I can hear him scream. He's a second too late. I go outside to overwater the plants again. Where is he? Hi, Mom. I took a different route as he flies by on his scooter. His melanin-rich skin glistens under the Sonoran desert sun, his braid a flagship anchoring him to his ancestors. Hashtag.
Letting you take that breath before I join you back on the screen here. But that one, it's wild how the poems choose you.
Well, my body's just tingly everywhere, all the way up to my head. Yeah.
And ese pinche alivio, right? Ese pinche alivio of that extra second, and then like there they are. There they are.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he's getting older. He's going to be 12. And, unfortunately, and to me, it's like, no, this isn't, calling in self-fulfilling prophecies and this and that. It's like, no, this is this is my reality. This is real. Right. Yeah. And so as he grows older and, he's growing, he's getting uppity. He wants to take, he's growing into his own natural process of independence out in the world. I very much have cataloged the age of the various children when they've been taken, right, by this police state. And I'm like, he's almost 12. He's almost at Tamir's Rice's age. Will he make it? Like at what point? Because this is just that reality. And I see my child and how he's being raised, who's around him and such. And it's just like, these various instances that it's like, that was his fault.
These instances of they grow up knowing full well who they are, right? Because I've had the grace of having Luname in our danza círculo and seeing him run around with my girls and having all of them with their greñas flowing free and sometimes braided nicely and to the point where even a photograph of him, right, inspired a little simple line drawing on my part.
Yeah,
and it was about resistance and just how he exists in the world, in the fullness of his own damn humanity, in a world that purposefully chooses not to be ready for that, right?
Yes.
Like, and targets them for daring to have the audacity to fully exist. And that, like when you were reading that poem, I'm like, oh my God, I can picture him, in that Phoenix landscape. And you love to call yourself a gentrification refugee and rightly so. And I didn't know you grew up in the Central Valley. In my imagination, you were always here first, here in the Bay. And I'm like, oh, okay. So that's why Phoenix isn't too far-fetched for you. But at the same time, like I'm zooming in from Gilroy and I'm thinking like, that's some wild, windy, serendipitous poem to pick you for today. Because before, somewhere in my day, I was trying to hash out my feelings about the weekend. And my daughter just turned 12. And she's got her whole, parallel issues of that and how she's identified. But also, like on Saturday, when we had family here for the first time in like an entire long time, not necessarily a full year, but I'm like, it was like, and I come from a big family. And so my nephews were here and my nieces were here, and they're all, straight A students. and they were like, "Can we walk to the library?" Mind you, I can see the library from where I live, so it's not like they're walking somewhere where I can't see. So there was an unmarked cop car, driving around, and we're all holding our breath, and we're thinking about that context.
Right.
We're watching these babies walking over there looking like the damn United Nations representative delegates of the Youth Commission or something, because, we've got a Mexican Vietnamese combination, Mexican Guatemalan combination, my daughters who look very güerita, even though they're just boring Mexican, como dicen. And to just, like, as moms, all sit there and like,
it does, like, it's just, it's so ingrained, right, in us, because we know that the system is, I mean, I don't even think unfair is the word, right? The system is just against. It's against, and it doesn't matter, whether you were acting right, acting not. It genuinely doesn't matter, And at this point, it's like, what else do people really need? Because it's there. Like, it's not hidden. It's not hidden.
And it's not just the cops, right? Because as I got up off my lawn chair to go be like, "Officer, those are some good kids." I'm like, "They're all good kids. They're all good kids." I was so fucking relieved when he drove away, and I was like, but then 2 minutes later, another cop car comes and parks in the parking lot and is scoping them out, and we're like, why does it feel this terrifying to have our babies walk to the library, exist and play as kids, and have to think about what's going on in their minds, because they're now old enough to notice. And my older daughter did come home and say, "Mom, we were in the library and a cop was following us around." And to have her realize that it doesn't matter, and it shouldn't matter. But here we are. And what world are we raising them in?
Yup. And my kid's the one that, like, when during all the uprisings, he's like, "Let's go. I got my bow and arrow. I'm going to run to the front line." I'm like, oh God. I was like, oh my gosh, and it's just like, yes, right? Because that should be, right? Because, I mean, he was raised in debug, right? Protect the people, he's Ogichida. So it's his whole entire surrounding is, social justice, protect the people, do what's right, take care of them. And, obviously he's very much aware of situations, what it is. He calls them slave patrols, he calls them as it should be. He calls them appropriately. So anyway, so yeah. And so as he gets older, it just sucks, because we can't just focus on, oh, he's getting older and here's your, like, normal, like, developmental milestones, right? You'll be reaching. It's like, oh, there's something else, that we're going to have to continue to contend with on an even more regular basis, because you don't stand down, you've been rooted, and, you wear that skin and that braid very proudly, and that is threatening to others.
Right.
So yeah.
So definitely your poems kind of hit, I don't want to say everywhere, but yeah, they holistically are a desahogo for the different parts of who you are. And in large part, you are a mother. You self-identify in large part as a mother. And you are also all of these other bits and pieces and overlapping wholenesses of sorts, right? And so you tell me when you're ready to throw down a second, third, or fourth one. I won't stop you. But I do know I'm not going to keep you all day. You do have stuff to do. And I know that inevitably your poems are going to trigger conversations and recollections on my part. Because I think that's what's beautiful about poems. They're long and short, and they help us connect the dots, not just between each other, but sometimes with ourselves, right? Like it's that desahogo that feels like an untangling, just like you said, somewhere to put it. So we're not carrying it, right?
No, yeah. And these are like, there's like this beautiful permission that happens, right? Because, I've been either witnessing them live or recorded via después, ¿verdad? The replay. But, each one that I've been able to see brings up, just that conversation, right? Brings up something, brings up a memory, and either writes, poem number 57 on it, or it writes the first one ever on it and stuff. Like when you had Salvador on, for the first time, like I wrote my very first police encounter, right? And stuff as a child. And that was because of the conversation and the plática that y'all were having and such. So very much so. I'm gonna do this one because Lucha Libre Yoga. Children stand atop bed frames, giant yoga balls used as launching pads, propelling children to the stars and onto their opponents. Toxic waste launches herself onto the huge pink yoga ball. Up she flies. Boom. She misses the ceiling fan. Sass, an elbow to the eye. Chile throws himself onto the smaller yoga ball. Purple yoga ball. Bam. Up he flies, arms flail a little. Splat, he missed his opponent. Lemonade flings himself onto both yoga balls. Sass, the sound of broken things. The wail of a tiny luchador makes its way out of the ring. Parents rumble up the stairs. They yell in a pack, "We can't go to the emergency room right now." Toxic waste, chile, lemonade, tears dry up. Salt goes on watermelon. Cousins' tummies hurt watching the blooper reel. What's the big word? The juxtaposition between the two poems.
I was gonna rascuache that word a little bit more, but you already got the refined one out there, so let's just roll with
it. Rascuache, because even as I'm saying it, I'm like, wait, is that the appropriate big word? English language, usage of the word. Do it. I want to hear the rascuache version.
Construct the poem in this juxtaposition to what you just shared. See, even my voice wants to change. So
right? No. You get your all Harvard cholos.
Oh my gosh. I did like there was a playfulness about that one, but also like some stuff that hits in a layered kind of way, right? And it's all pieces and every line in that poem is relatable because it activates for me a story. And for someone else, it might hit differently, right? But I'm curious, like, what's the backstory, if you don't mind sharing, of what got that yoga ball action on paper?
Oh my goodness. So early on, when the pandemic hit or people realized there was something and just people were going bonkers and everything. So one of my brothers came out from Utah, drove down because Arizona was one of the places that ran out of supplies and toilet paper. So then, there was jokes and whatnot. And we're like, dude, Luna May had come back from hiking. He's like, Mom, look, I got all of us a rock. This is Nana's rock. This is your rock. And this is my rock. I'm like, we're good to go. We don't need toilet paper. So yeah. So we were good. We had our rocks. We were ready to go. We ran out of toilet paper. But so my brother came down from Utah. He brought supplies down and, he's the baby. So we had to check on his mom and make sure everything was good. And I knew what I was doing. And so we had them here. And that then entails that it turns into 1, 2, 3 children and a baby. And of course, that then multiplies and it turns into like 20 kids in your house. So yeah, this is a rambunctious bunch and they're all playing. Tia Luna has different sizes of yoga balls. And they turn into something other than a yoga ball, right? Whenever they come over, because they turn into launching pads. So estos condenados thought it was funny. So they pulled all the yoga balls. I have 3 total, and they were all in my room. You see that ceiling fan? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so they thought it was hilarious. So they were luchadores because Tia Luna has lucha mass. And so they were just doing lucha libre. So they were all had the mask on the head and they had their names and they were jumping from the bed to the yoga ball and trying to hit. I don't know what formulations were happening. There was just beds, jumping, yoga balls, that ceiling fan. And we're downstairs and we can hear all the chingazos, right? Like that's it. And then of course you're stop it, stop playing. Yelling out, you're just yelling, you're parenting from downstairs until obviously, right? Until someone cries. And then that's when everybody goes up, and obviously it was early on. So of course my standing joke during the pandemic, anytime anybody says ow, is like, we can't go to the hospital right now. We can't afford to be going up into that spot right now. So then that's why it was like, we can't go to the emergency room, like Carmen Center, what have you. But mind you, we knew what they were doing until someone cried and I forgot who missed who or what and stuff. And so then of course, right, then they get in trouble and you sit them down. And then next thing you know, they get, they're getting ice cream and treats because now you want to hear, well, what happened? What did you do? Tell me what it was. And then you're laughing at their tarugadas and you're just like, oh my gosh, these kids are not going to make it. So
and then they might, right? Because they're not afraid of falling, that's for sure. And that's a part of the lessons, right, that they're learning. And so that you called out the juxtaposition, and I'm like, it's a complementary kind of contrast though, right? Because it's oftentimes we talk about this in a broader sense of how folks want to talk about our resilience and our resistance. And there's this weird reluctance to talk about the playfulness and the joy. And we don't compartmentalize those. I mean, how many times have we gotten kicked out of wherever, the library, the hospital room, the funeral home, for being too loud?
Oh my gosh. We have a family thread, right? Amongst like we have a family thread and there's no tios or tias on there. There's no adults on there. So there's this thread between, cousins and siblings and stuff. And oh my gosh, like, there's some just tarugadas that come through sometimes. And one of the little memes, it's like those questions, right? Like who would? And so I think the question reads something along the lines of like, like what two people cannot be next to each other at a funeral? And oh my gosh, that little thing alone, like fires off this thread because it's instant. They're like, oh my gosh, so and so and so and so, you guys would get kicked out. And then of course it turns into why you would get kicked out and the scenarios what you're going to be doing at the funeral. And I'm like, oh my gosh. I was like, yeah, that's why we need to do them outdoors and just call it a party because then nobody's going to get kicked out.
It's a celebration of life. That's
right?
Yeah.
I know. Growing up, it was like, I've been kicked out of better places than this.
Getting shushed everywhere. But you don't get shushed from your poems. Your notebooks kind of are like, you go ahead, cuéntame tus penas, cuéntame your joys. And I think that's what I love. It's like it's not even a solitary process. Maybe it is for you, but for me, it always feels like there's like you're bringing community in. And some of those poems know damn well they're going to get shared later. And some of them are like, this is us putting it here in the parking lot and a ver how it speaks to you later. And then you're thumbing through and you're like, that one's in the do not read list. And it's all, oh no, read me today. Right. And that's how it goes.
Oh, I don't want to.
Hey. And I love when I'm like, I can't read you. It's the radio. I can't say bad words on the radio. And the poem is like, well, figure it out right now.
Just bleep you. Yeah, it's all, they have technology. They just go beep, beep. And you're like, but you don't read well without it. Yeah, they do. They have their own personality. They very much do. They have their own personality. They have their own life. And I think that's why for me, right, with taking them out of me, it's because I'm acknowledging that these are not me. Yes, these are my experiences. These are moments in my life, but they're not me. They don't define me. These are things that have happened to me and they've affected me, but it doesn't define me, And so by putting them on paper, it's like, here, it's its own thing. And and it can live, you know, see mama again, and it can live as it's, you know, within its own entity. And they gain their own personality, and some of them are shy, and some of them are like, they come with like an outfit, they come with props, you know. And they have their own voice.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's because early on, the two individuals, you know, that really, like, you can say pushed me, were very much about find your voice and don't mimic your voice the way, you know, some poets are doing. Like, don't be, you know, don't drop into that poetic voice and start doing the when I was and doing that stuff.
And some people can, right? So, like, that's their flow. And some of them, you know, respectful people that I've always admired and look up to and associate that cadence with them. And that's just not how the poems find me, right?
Mm-hmm. And so they were very much about talking about finding your voice, right? Finding your voice and the poem's voice, because each poem was going to have their own voice as well. So very much don't force it to sound like a certain way, because that may not be the way, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you know, for me, like, I was just fortunate to have these two individuals do that for me early on, so that as I, you know, entered that journey of actually sharing them, then I had that already, where it was like, okay, they're all going to sound different because they have their own entity versus like trying, you know, I was new, right? So versus, you know, in LA or going to LA readings and hearing this cadence where for some was natural and for some it was forced, right? It was a show. And hearing this cadence and they're like, nope, don't, you know, if that's your cadence, that is, but if not, find yours, find the poems. And so, you know, then they're all trilingual, multilingual, Tongan.
Right? Yeah. Or sometimes a word will catch you and it's like, untangle me. You got to unpack what I'm trying to tell you.
Right.
Yeah. And I know that there's somebody asked once, what inspires the rhythm of your poems? I'm like, it depends. It depends. And I don't know if you have a clear answer for you to that, but I think in that moment I was like, they kind of have like a hip hop lyrical cadence to them. And I don't know if that's an accident or if that's like my little alter ego trying to emerge from that life. You know what I mean? Because I always love to joke and be like, in an alternate universe, I wouldn't have been as afraid of my parents, and maybe I could be writing rap lyrics for a living. But here we are in a college classroom. Hey.
But you still do. I'm over here like having a moment picturing you. I'm all wiki.
You know, I have a cousin who's about that life, and there was like this nudge where I was like, I think we can collaborate. And somebody's like, well, what if you just battled your cousin? I'm all, whoa. He's got like experience. Like, I ain't trying to, come on.
You're all calmado.
Así no se lleva.
Right? I don't know. You know what? I've been told that there is that when I read, there's a song. So it comes out like in a song. And I've been told that, right? You know, because obviously me myself, I'm like, I don't know, they just sound like that, or, you know. But I've been told that when I read, I read in song form. So I guess because there's a melody or there's a tune or there's a flow to it. I'm sure there's some type of ocean rhythm that's coming in. Because some of them do feel, you know, just very like, just, you know, like calm ocean. And some of them are very much like when them waves are just crashing, or, you know, there's a storm and it's sloshing everything around.
I don't know why I'm thinking canción de cuna, and you're not saying that, but I'm like, I'm hearing that phrase, canción de cuna, and that can take all of those forms, you know?
And that's funny because there are a couple of my pieces that have, I've inserted lullabies into them. I've inserted lullabies into them, or I've inserted songs into them and stuff. And so then as I'm reading, there's also songs happening in between. So yeah. And the one that I remember, there's one, it's specifically titled Nighttime Lullabies, and it's talking about what do I have it? And it's talking about childhood, growing up, just being kids, but also talking about, growing up, in the barrio, in the neighborhood, helicopters, and not being allowed to be kids, right? And so again, another one of those, right? And stuff. And that one's speaking very clearly to like a lot of the folks that, that we grew up with on our block, and just kind of, the way that their lives were going and such because of where we lived. Right. So yeah, but I think I agree. I think it just depends, because even the first one that I opened up with, I have no clue how it was going to sound, because I had just written it. I barely typed it up, and I've never read it. So I don't know, is it going to come out like an angry mom, a sad mom, a scared mom, just me? Or like, how is it going to come out? Like, how is it going to read? Even when I wrote it, because I had just done free write that day. So even as I'm typing it up, I typed it up as is. So it literally was just like complete run-on sentences. And then I'm like, this morning, I was like, okay, where are the breaks at, right? And do those breaks belong there? Do I need to adjust it? And the only way to know that is reading it, and then even then finding out if it even wants to be read, right? Because maybe it doesn't. I don't know. But I agree. It just depends. It really, truly depends. There isn't, I don't know. For me, there isn't,
There isn't like a standard form for you either, right? Like, because I've seen some of them have like a hint of a rhyme and some lines, and a lot of your poems don't. And somebody asked me, do all your poems rhyme? I'm on, no, just during National Poetry Month. Because it's easy to play with rhyming words in this month, right? Like, we'll catch a word and we're like, what rhymes with this? And the kids start playing along. And so it becomes like a household plática.
Yes.
We know that I wrote poems. And then there's like what we grew up with and who influences that in the full range of what that means, right? Mm-hmm. Sometimes by force, like there's some shit that I'm like, excuse me, Shel Silverstein, but I apparently stole your cadence for this rhyme, and it was not my fault. It was the poem. That's how it wanted to be read.
Right.
So, but I
wanted to emulate and honor you.
I read back and I'm like, I need to edit this. And the poem is like, you leave me the hell alone. That's how it came out. This is a forced part of your childhood, and just be with the damn tree and go. Right.
Right? I know I've done that to some, and it's just like a comma. I'm like, okay, I'm put a comma because I'm put a comma. I'm the writer. Damn it. I wrote you. I birthed you.
There's no capital in this line. There's no capitalization here. You leave me alone with my ellipses in perpetuity.
Right. It's like, yeah, déjame en paz. It's like, go write something else. Sheesh.
There are some poems. Do you have poems in this way where I have this one poem in particular, and I want to read it, and the poem's like, not yet. And I'm like, it's so ripe for the times, and the poem's on, not yet. You gotta wait.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've had some like that where I'm like, yeah, the yoga one. I wrote that one in English, and because it's talking about lucha libre, I really, 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 really wanted to read it for the Sonora reading, right? Because it's about lucha libre, right? So let's talk about lucha libre in Mexico. And so I really wanted to read it for that, but the reading for that was all in Spanish. So I literally like sat down at the coffee shop and I was like, okay, poem, please, please translate. Like, please, I really want to share you in a different language. Like, I literally I begged the poem because.
Did you leave it en ofrenda?
We were at the coffee shop and yes, because I spilled my coffee. My mom was there, and my mom was like, I even told my mom, I was like, Mom, I want to read it in Spanish, pero no sé si se va a dejar. And so she's like, okay, pues a ver. So she's there. I was like, come on, Luna Me. I was like, come on, folks, like, help me. I'm like, Mom, how do you say this? Does this sound right? Let me read it too. I'm like reading. I've never done that with my mom. And I was like, let me read a poem to you. Tell me, does it make sense? Does it say this? Because I wanted to say this. Does it? And she's like sitting there like, yeah, I guess. Like, you know, she's like, "Se fue esa vez." I'm like, yeah. But the poem. Because I really wanted to read it in Spanish, but I wasn't guaranteed that the poem was going to work in a different language because it wasn't written in it. And I was like, how do you translate these kids flying off the freaking walls with a yoga ball? Lucha Libre is one thing, but I went and inserted a yoga ball to it, you know? So, so yeah, some do, some don't. Some are like, nope. And then some lose. Some are like, okay, I'm done. I have this piece. I want to try it one more time because maybe it was because it was my first reading after a really, really long time. So I'm like, okay, maybe it was because I was just like out of practice. But I have this one poem. It's called Vagina Monologues, and it's talking about the word just went away from my brain. But the forced eugenics, forced sterilization of, you know, Black and brown Indigenous women. And so, and obviously when I first wrote that one, you know, it's very like fierce, strong, and it's very like, right, cut you. The last time I read it, it didn't have that energy. And I felt like I was forcing it to have the same energy that I remembered it to have. And I don't know if the energy has shifted or if it was me literally, I hadn't read in public for years, like a really long time. And so, you know, so which of the two? So I was like, okay, let me, like, I'll read it again at another point in time. And then we'll go from there. But I do feel that some of them lose. I mean, I don't think they lose. They close. They like just go to sleep and they're like, I've done what I needed to do, and I'm, you know, I'm retired. They're retired poems.
You're retired. Ya me jubilé.
Right. They're like, yeah, no.
Professor Jimenez, he talked about at his retirement party. He's, I'm not retiring, me estoy jubilando. That's a different connotation. And I'm like, yes. And I'm paraphrasing, but that stuck with me. And I don't know why that just came right now. Talking about your poem. Is it retired or está jubilado?
It is. I'm like, oh, it is. That is two very different. That is very true. That is very true. All right. Se está jubilando.
Jubilando el poem. And I know we're getting up on that hour, and I don't like to keep folks too long because, again, we can do this for hours, and it's been proven. Right. And I don't know if you wanted to bust out a third one. And I'm curious to see power of three.
Let me see. I'll do. Can I do two more?
Do whatever you want. They're your poems talking to you over there, and they won't leave you alone if you if it's all read me and you're like, no, we run out of time, and the poem will be like,
Right now, I'll be like Facebook Live. Luna May, help me do a Facebook Live. Oh, let me see. I'm gonna do.
You ever do a blind, like, just let me close my eyes and pick one?
But now I know where they're all at.
I've done that on the radio where I cannot. All the poems are shouting at me right now.
Right, that's what they're doing. I'm like, don't you see me? I'm like, I'm like, what do I do? Do I talk about going to a witch doctor or something else? Let me do this.
And I do want to link to. I know you sell your wares online, and some of those wares include notebooks for other people to write, but also some of your chapbooks, right?
Yes.
So yes. I'll link to those as my homework for sure.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I don't know. They're all like, let me see. Let me just do this one. Went to a witch doctor once, bloodletted for days. So embedded were you. I didn't realize I was just comfortable, swimming in your essence, flowing throughout, within, all around, never choked. When little, were thrown to the ocean. Went to a witch doctor once, cured, he said I was, amid Bruce Lee's training square. I received my blood transfusion. No good, he said. When I wasn't looking, he put you back in. Never choked. When we're little, we're thrown to the ocean. Went to a witch doctor once. Cured, he said I was. Cured, I thought I was. Never choked. When little, we're thrown to the ocean. Went to a witch doctor once. He didn't know about Atlachinoli. I can't ever be separated from the other. 13 years later, still flows, breathes, whispers, adore, love, always you. Went to a witch doctor once, never choked. When little, were thrown to the ocean. You pulse once more, like a whale's song deep on the ocean floor. Witch doctor knew I'd need you later to remember to be adored under the moonlight. When little, we're thrown to the ocean and we catch our first breath. Deep breath. Gasp.
And those gasps, right? It's been a recurring theme, the catching of breath. And I'm one of those folks who I'm like, I don't believe in accidents of those kinds. And poems have a way of having a collective conversation with each other across poets and with the times, right? And for as much as some of your poems have decided to go into jubilación, I think some pick and choose when to activate different angles of what they're trying to say. And in that way, I feel like poems are magic, you know? There's a twinkliness about them.
There is. There is. I thought you were gonna say there's a twinkling about you. I was gonna be all like, oh my gosh.
Because you're capturing the poems and you're listening. And people like to say that, we're good with words. And I'm like, yeah. And in large part, I always feel like the work of poets is being good listeners and observers, in some ways translators, right? And in this situation, we happen to translate things into words and catch it before it's gone. Because esa jubilación, sometimes it happens before you even get it on paper. I don't know if you have these situations, but I'm like, I'm driving. I better get that now because the poem's trying to catch me. And if I don't get it now, pull over and write at least 5 words down of what it's trying to anchor as a message, then it's gone.
It goes by.
Yeah.
Yep. It's just passing through. You got it. If you know, then maybe a la vuelta, maybe not.
Maybe. Yeah. Some boomerang back and they're like, okay, but not, it's not always like that.
It's not the same because there's also that, how you mentioned, right? That twinkle and that magic. There's a energy going. There's an energy happening. And that's when you really, really want to capture it because there is, right? You're capturing this magic, this magical moment, and it could come back or you could remember it, but it's not the same because now that magic and that energy isn't involved anymore because now you're just writing from a memory. You're just repeating a memory or a moment. You're like, oh yeah, I remember that was that line and then that line versus when you're writing it in the moment, you're like looking for words. You're looking at your I don't know about you, but I have a vocabulary wall of like, oh, I'm going to use that word one day. You're like, can I use orange Kool-Aid now? I still have yet to use orange Kool-Aid, but can I use orange Kool-Aid now? No. Oh, okay. Let me find a different, you're just trying to find a way to translate and to paint these pictures. And, and when you're just remembering, that's literally what you're doing. You're just dictating versus in that moment, you're like, is this enough? Is this good enough? Like, do you like this, little magical energy? Like, is this enough? Is this good to do you like it? Is this an appropriate way to explain what's happening? And then what happens afterwards, right? Like you're writing one thing and then sometimes another one jumps in. So you're having to cross a line to make sure that when you go back, you're like, oh, but that's a different poem from that one. And salen como 5 a la vez, se mamontonan.
And they're battling. Sometimes they're jumping on the yoga balls like the kids were in your poem. And otras veces ahí andan bailando cumbia. And you're like,
right.
okay.
Can I link you? Can I link you too? No, you're separate? Okay, cool, separate. You want to break up? Some of them break up.
Some of them, they're like, ni en pintura, no me pongas next to that poem. Thank you very much.
No quiero. When you do your book, they better be on a different page than me.
It better be on a different book. Okay. Yeah. I feel that. I feel that. People hear me talking about this and they're like, are you for real? And I'm like, dude, yes.
Right? That's why they're all tan zafadas, tan locas. It's like, dude, you don't understand the voices that show up. You don't know.
It's like, I don't know why I always think like when somebody makes a really good caldo and they spice it differently and they know when to put it in there, and no two people are going to be able to copy the exact same recipe and yield the same results. There's like this special kind of poetic magic that happens even in that, right? And that's where the people magic comes in también.
Yeah.
I'm fascinated and I'm thankful that you all entertain me and indulge me in these requests and are willing to come and play along for a little bit. It gives me a pause. It gives me this space of esparcimiento to just not think of, it's not a part of my business, so to speak. But I feel like most of my business is folks bearing witness to my ofrendas in action and the recuerdo for you to take away. And I'm thankful that y'all are generously giving of your time and sharing of your words and your process. And the hope is that this, I love enabling toward some good, healthy things for people to do. And this is one of those things that belongs to all of us, right? If you choose to listen.
Yeah. And it is, I think, and I appreciate and I'm grateful, right, for these moments, for these pauses that you're taking, because I feel that it allows those, whether they're the individuals that you're playing with at that moment, or whether they're individuals just listening, it's a moment to tap in and to reconnect to our humanness, right? Because we're so like just going, surviving, thriving, just in chinga. And these are those moments to just like pause, right? Because art, I have a friend, right? And she says art is the direct pitazo to the soul. And to take these pauses and do this is a moment to just connect back with your soul and just have that type of inner language happening, that dialogue happening that, sometimes we may not get it. Like we can craft it. We can be like, I'm going to meditate. I'm going to stop, or I have healthy boundaries and I'm just going to have a minute. But sometimes, that's just not it. And especially, for some, depending on what you do on a day-to-day basis as your job itself might be, super, super heavy. And so these are important, and they're ofrendas, right? And they're marking these moments in time. They're historical markers that it's like, these are, these are the conversations and the palabras that were coming out during that time period. And so they're important. They're important.
They might speak to us differently, months from now, years from now, quién sabe. And that's a part of the extra layer of magic too, right? It's coming back to ourselves at different little constellation points, if you will. Pero con eso, I don't know if you want to close out with any other magical words.
I will. I'll do this one. I'm not the previous one. Just love it. The previous one, todavía me chivea and stuff. It's a boyfriend, lover I had in undergrad, and then, walk separate paths. And then, it was one of those that was like rooted deep and got into the bloodstream, and it took a minute to get him out of the bloodstream. And then we reconnected like 13 years at that point in time when that poem was written. It's an oldie, 13 years later. And it was beautiful because we had a minute to heal some stuff and just like seal it off like really pretty, put like our, like seal it up really pretty and move on and stuff. So that's why when I was like, oh my gosh, you could tell, I was like, oh my gosh. But anyway, so I will leave off with this one.
Dale.
Yemaya receiving her baby, chocolate-covered pennies floating on yellow flowers. In the darkness, I sang with you, caressed my shadow side. My flaws and insecurities became my gifts in your presence, light. How deep can you swim? Sit on the ocean floor, breathe. Silent ocean waves follow me into the ocean, moonlight beams.
Short, sweet, tender.
Just
Yeah,
like
I'm gonna put that in your slide deck when I finally send you over a little PowerPoint template.
Oh my gosh, right?
I'm gonna have to re-listen to it so I don't butcher and paraphrase the language with my own twist on there.
We put a little limon on it.
Thank you so much for sharing a little glimpse into how you flow and your flowetry / poetry, and your poems are very holistic in the sense that they capture different parts of who you are as a woman, as a mother, as someone who does healing mental health work out in the community and is always down for speaking on injustice, and to hear the humanity in your poems and how they kind of speak collectively. It's a reminder that we're more than just our jobs, and we're more than one little glimpse into who we be, because we're expansive and vast in that way. And I love that you do that, and that it's an invitation for other people to take some time to be with their whole selves like that, with the giggly recollections of loves come and gone, and pieces of mothering, and the playful and also worry side of things, because they all of those coexist on any given day, right? And so I love that those collectively spoke in this space in the last hour here with you. Lydia Zulema Martinez Vega. I ain't gonna lie, I love that your mama made a voice cameo over there, because I was hoping that she would make a cameo with her punteria y todo eso.
Oh my gosh, she makes cameos. She's like taking coffee orders from like epidemiologists in Washington, D.C. And I'm just like, and then we wonder. Yeah.
Awesome legacy. Bueno, pues, mujer,
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I know you've got some stuff to get to, and I look forward to continuing to have just mama talks with you here and there through the interwebs, como digo, and that support, from California to Arizona. I think aquí nos respaldamos in different ways throughout time, and I appreciate you for that.
Always. And let me know when your store's at mall.
The store is always there. This just needs to reflect. It needs to reflect the whole. Like these mugs, right? Commercial right here.
The poem was from my forthcoming third book. Así le hacen. Yes. Book. Así le hacen, right?
Yes.
From the third book.
I love you. All right. Well, have a pleasant evening. And for folks tuning in, catch us on the replay in full if you didn't get a chance. Lydia shared some really heartfelt poems, some playful poems, all the words. And sometimes rhymes, and sometimes just taking some time. Y aquí estamos, in all cheesiness. Thank you for playing today. I'll catch you on the next one.
Bye.
Bye.